G'day Guardians, it's Matt here, and today I'm showing off a build for the Lucky Raspberry Exotic for all of my PvE Arc Strider mains out there. This build is going to ensure that you'll have optimal grenade energy uptime in case that cheeky Lucky Raspberry decides to be a little bit unlucky. We're going to be utilizing some elemental well mods that have come out over the last couple seasons to ensure that everything can string together nicely. If you're looking for a hot new hunter build to take into Grandmasters, then I recommend Omnioculus. Lucky Raspberry will not be taking you anywhere near that besides some very casual PvE content or something like Gambit. If you like the idea of spamming arc bolt grenades all over the shop though, and not having to think about anything in general, then this build is for you. And honestly, there's something extremely satisfying about electrocuting packs of adds with your grenade spam. It's a low effort build, but man, it turns Lucky Raspberry from a hot stinking pile of garbage into something with a little bit more substance. So it might be time to dust it off out of the vault. I know it's been sitting there since year one, and let's give it another chance. Now, if you're like me, for some reason, I actually do like Lucky Raspberry for some reason. It's a no-frills exotic that buffs grenade gameplay, and for me, sometimes that's all I'm after when I'm just jumping on for some fun. If you aren't completely across what Lucky Raspberry does though, it increases the chaining capability of the arc bolt grenade, but it does have some grenade refunding capability as well. And this is where people start to lose their interest in the exotic. If you throw a well-placed arc bolt grenade and it does a full chain of damage, you're guaranteed a complete grenade refund. Seems reasonable, right? Throw a well-placed grenade into a pack of adds and you're rewarded with another grenade. 90% of the time, I'm finding a successful refund with this on about 4 to 5 adds that get hit with the arc bolt chain. The downside, and it's a pretty big drawback for some people, is that if you don't hit a full chain on your arc bolt grenade, it becomes a 50-50 dice roll on whether you'll get a refund or not. And this is where the lucky part of its name comes from. The exotic reads, arc bolt grenades have a chance to recharge each time it deals damage. The full chain will always recharge it. So essentially this exotic is doing two things. It's rewarding players for hitting a full change from the arc bolt grenade by giving them a complete refund of grenade energy. The second thing is the 50-50 dice roll, where if you throw a grenade at 1 or 2 adds, the exotic will kick in and determine whether or not you're lucky enough to get a full refund or absolutely nothing. The thing I struggled the most with was constantly comparing it to Controverse holds for Warlock, since that refunds grenade energy based on damage and hits, so it always feels like you're being rewarded. Lucky Raspberry takes that control away from the player. If you're not throwing those perfect well-placed nades into a group of adds, the exotic basically says to you, pray to the RNG gods and hope you get a refund on the other grenade throws. It starts to feel a lot less impactful when you're having a run and the grenade isn't being refunded time after time. At that point, you start to question yourself, is it even worth running this exotic if I'm just playing a dice roll or just saving my grenade for the perfect 5 trash mobs that are going to be grouped together later? It'd be okay if it worked in similar fashion to Controverse holds and refunded energy back on damage, but it doesn't. It's either a full refund or absolutely nothing. So I decided to do some deep diving because I wanted to make Lucky Raspberry viable, and I wanted to put the control back to the player. I know there's a cult following out there of Lucky Raspberry lovers just like me, so I knew there'd be a way in today's current sandbox to make the exotic better. And I found it, so I hope you guys do enjoy it. We're going to be pairing it with Top Tree Arc Strider. Now before you go, Matt, what are you talking about? Every single other video on YouTube recommends going middle tree or bottom tree for their perks. I know that they're both awesome, but in fact, all 3 trees are completely viable for Lucky Raspberry. But it seems to me that Top Tree has always been completely overlooked in the past, and I wasn't even ready to consider it until I was at my wit's end with theory crafting this build and gave it a look again. The reason we want to be using Top Tree is for this perk here, Combat Flow. It's not flashy by any means, melee kills will recharge our dodge. Now if we pair this with Gambler's Dodge, which allows our dodge to be recharging our melee, we've now created a super easy combat loop that goes melee dodge, and repeat. I know you're probably thinking, why are we even talking about melees and dodges when this is a grenade exotic? I know, just bear with me. But the other 3 perks in the subclass are just great passives to have. I'm not going to go into them though, because they don't provide any extra utility for the build. Alright, so let's jump into the mods. Like I mentioned earlier, this isn't a very flashy build, but I promise I'll cover my rationale for the theory crafting behind this. I'm running 4 melee well makers across my armor and bountiful wells on my cloak. This combination will allow us to generate 5 elemental wells from our melee ability. This is something that we can have up all the time thanks to our dodge melee combat loop from the subclass perk. On my helmet, I'm also running Ashes to Assets and taking advantage of the 1-cost artifact mod hands-on. I decided not to bank on double Ashes to Assets because if you're having an unlucky time and you're not getting any grenade refunds, you actually won't be throwing many grenades to generate super, and instead you'll be using your melee as part of the combat loop anyway, which I'm going to break down in the next section anyway, but may as well use both, in my opinion. On my arms, I'm running Fastball for that extra grenade distance, makes sense since we're using a grenade build, and Impact Induction, which reduces our grenade cooldown from melee attacks. On my chest piece, you can run whichever resist mods you prefer, but I find double concussives does the trick. On my legs, I have double innovation as a passive working in the background. It's always nice having that grenade cooldown reduced in any way. And lastly, on my cloak, I have particle deconstruction because I like to melt things, and explosive finisher to give me a full grenade recharge in case Lucky Raspberry is being extra rude. Now, all of these mods paired together are enough to give you a full grenade refund. But if you like running arc weapons, there is another variation that you can use. You can remove one of the melee well makers and put in Font of Might, and you can substitute your arms to taking off Fastball and putting on a second Impact Induction. The results from either mod variations here will give you the same thing. Now, I'll round back and actually rationalize how these mods relate to Lucky Raspberry. Lucky Raspberry is a dice roll game. If you throw that grenade into a group of ads, you're almost guaranteed the refund, but these mods come into play to help you out in those very unlucky times that you don't receive the refund. You might decide to throw that grenade at maybe 2 or 3 ads and realize that the RNG gods don't actually like you, and they give you nothing back. In which case, if you're running around using Lucky Raspberry and you're never getting your grenade up due to it being unlucky, you're gonna find yourself wanting to take the exotic off. This build though is to change your mind. It will give you optimal uptime if you're experiencing an unlucky streak. So here's how it plays, and here's how you can kind of cheat the RNG gods. If you get a full grenade refund back, beautiful, you have been deemed lucky. If you don't get a refund, here's the string of commands. Use your melee on an enemy. This will give you the energy from 5 elemental wells and also from impact induction. Dodge, find another unsuspecting red bar and melee again. After 2 melee kills, you'll have a completely recharged grenade. I spend a lot of time in the lab testing out multiple different elemental well mods, as well as mods like firepower and grenade kickstart, but started to realize that there's no point in trying to refund little bits of your grenade back because you're waiting around too long for your grenade. You're going to get bored of running Lucky Raspberry that way. Now, because that grenade energy is all or nothing, something like the new stasis mod Grenade Kickstart isn't worth running because you'll just be waiting around for the remaining 70% of the energy to come back. The mods I'm suggesting turned out to be the fastest way to get a fully refunded grenade back in those dire times when you've been classed unlucky. You can't physically get it back any quicker than the 2 melee kills I've mentioned, but in the grand scheme of things, this isn't a lot of time spent. Meleeing 2 red bars to death is pretty quick, and it'll mean that your grenade is guaranteed to come back. So I recommend just using that arc bolt grenade whenever you want, whether it's 1 ad or 2, throw it anyway because if it doesn't give you a refund, you can just find 2 other red bars, melee them to death, grab the elemental wells, and you're back in action with another grenade ready to go. Now, for the stats, you definitely don't want to be speccing anything into mobility or strength, since Gambler's Dodge and the subclasses perk will refund each other on cooldown. Intellect isn't overly important since the super does suck pretty bad, and we do have those double helmet mods generating additional super for us anyway. I've just decided to dump my stats into recovery for extra survivability and discipline just in case there's a rare scenario where I can't find any enemies to melee for those elemental wells. I just don't want to be stranded too long waiting for my grenade cooldown to come back. As for the weapons, anything with Demolitionist is always going to be welcome in a grenade build, but since this exotic is RNG based and gives you either all energy or no energy back, you kind of want to run anything, because if you fall into the trap of generating grenade energy bit by bit, you'll be ending up waiting for the remainder, whereas this build we're designed to try and get it back within 2 melee kills. Another weapon that does pair kind of well though is Trinity Ghoul, since your grenade kills will proc Lightning Rod for you, but again, nothing is necessary. With a little bit of luck, you'll only be relying on your grenades for kills anyway, but if you don't get that refund, you can always jump into the fight, grab those 2 melee kills, and then you're back into it again with your grenade spam. And so just to wrap this video up, one thing I want to note is that these mods paired with Top Tree Arcstrider don't actually provide anything unique to the Lucky Raspberry exotic experience. You can run all of this on any Arcstrider exotic and you can still receive your grenade back with the same string of commands. And it could be with any grenade for that matter. So what I'm trying to say is that Lucky Raspberry is kind of okay, but this build makes it pretty fun to have on. It'll stop you from feeling discouraged every single time that you don't get a grenade refund back, which to me makes it a lot more usable. It's definitely for hardcore Lucky Raspberry fans out there who want to optimize its RNG perk, but also if you want to have a nice and easy Arc Strider build to set up with minimal effort required. The gameplay feels unbelievable when you're constantly blessed with refunds, and now you have a tool in your arsenal to fix it when you get unlucky and don't get those refunds. Let me know your thoughts. I'd love to hear all different iterations of this build. If you're using different mods or different weapons to enhance it, I'd love to hear it in the comments. And as always guys, take it easy, Guardians.